Look, you catching on. See, a lot of my sayings, my students still say, so great. Ready, Freddie? I say that all the time. I do. It's okay. You may accidentally do it. All right, so cut and paste, example 1, example 2, and example 3, and we're done. Ready? No. Freddy's. So recall, don't write this down, but earlier this week, we talked about how to verify whether two matrices are inverses, correct? And that's where we had a matrix A, and a matrix B, and we multiplied them together, correct? And if they equal the identity matrix, then they were inverses, right? Today, we're going to focus on finding the inverse, okay? And so how to find the inverse goes as following. It's a 4-step process. Step 1, we find the determinant of the matrix. If the determinant equals 0, you're done because there's no inverse. You just stop. Got it? If the determinant does not equal 0, then there is an inverse and you keep going, okay? So you're going to identify your elements A, B, C, and D. Identify just means that you make sure that you understand that for the formula, A, B, C, D goes left to right, then top to bottom, right? A, B, C, D. Then we're going to plug into the formula. So the formula is, to find the inverse, it's 1 over your determinant times this matrix. And what happens with the new matrix, all you're doing is you're switching your first diagonal. So on your first diagonal, you're switching the place of your A and your D. So do you see why it says DA? Okay. And then on the second diagonal, you're changing their signs. And then that's where everything goes. All right. And then you evaluate the formula. Evaluate just means you're going to multiply or divide or whatever you need to do. Sounds terrible? No, it doesn't. Sounds doable. All right, ready? Ready to try? All right, here's our first example. So we have matrix A equals -3, 6, -1, 3. And we want to know, does it have an inverse? And if it does, what is its inverse? So write down matrix A. The first thing we're going to do is find the determinant of matrix A. And how do I find the determinant? Cross multiply and what? Subtract. So we cross multiply. So we have -3 times 3 minus 6 times -1. That gives us -9 plus 6. And what's -9 plus 6? -3. So there's our determinant. And sadly, does it equal 0? No. So what does that mean? It has an inverse. So we keep going. Okay? Because it doesn't equal 0, that means it has an inverse and we keep going. Okay? So then in step 2 is to make sure you understand what's your A, your B, your C, and your D. So for this problem, I'm just going to rewrite it because mine is way up there. I see my A, my B, my C, and my D, right? We're comfortable with where A, B, C, and D are? And 3, we're now going to plug into the formula. So to find the inverse, it equals 1 over your determinant. And what was our determinant? -3. So 1 over -3 times, and the formula tells us to switch our first diagonal. So on the first diagonal, we have -3 and +3. So when we switch, they're going to become 3 and -3. And then on the second diagonal, we're going to change their signs. So instead of -1, it becomes a +1. Instead of a +6, it becomes a -6. And that's plugging into the formula. How do we feel about the formula?
So hard.
So hard, I know. All right, step 4 is to actually evaluate. So we're going to go through the multiplication. When you're multiplying by a fraction, what does that mean you're doing mathematically? Anyone? When you're multiplying by a fraction, what does that mean you're doing? You're dividing. So we're dividing each one of these by -3. So it has -6 divided by -3, 1 divided by -3, and -3 divided by -3. So what's our inverse? So 3 divided by -3 is -1. -6 divided by -3 is +2. 1 divided by -3 is -1/3. And -3 divided by -3 is 1. And here's our inverse. That wasn't terrible, was it? So. So we found the determinant. We identified our A, B, C, D. We plugged into the formula and we multiplied. Question, comments, concerns? Maybe if someone wasn't on their phone, they wouldn't need that 1 second.
Miss Jones, I was handling business.
Yes, Juan.
I don't know, like, if it's only for this problem, but maybe like, no, I don't know. So like if you just put the time from step 1, to make another to divide everything, and you just divide everything.
That's just for this problem. Yeah. All right. Okay. Now, here's me being nice. Example 2, how to do it in a calculator. Okay. So does the matrix A even have an inverse? How do we answer that part? What do? We find its determinant. So the first question says, does this have an inverse? So I'm going to find its determinant. And how do we find the determinant again? Cross multiply and subtract. So we have 4 times 2 minus 2 times 3. And that gives us 8 minus 6, which equals 2. So does it have a determinant? Yes. So we know that there's a not determinant, an inverse. To find the inverse in the calculator, we're going to go through these steps. We make sure that it's a square matrix and we make sure that there's an inverse. So that's step 1. Step 2, you're going to, again, I like to clear my calculator before I do anything. If I start a new document, no, she don't want to be saved. Okay, so we're going to press the math template. We're going to get our matrix. We're going to fill it in. So we have 4, 2, 3, 2. I thought I was filling it in. Tricked myself. 2, 3, 2. Okay. Now, once you filled in the matrix, you're going to tab outside of the matrix and you're going to step 3, you're going to press the caret button. So this little guy is right underneath the equal sign and it should create a little tiny box. Are you outside the matrix? All right. Are we all here? In that little tiny box, you're going to type in -1. We're going to type in -1. And then hit enter. And there's your inverse. So A inverse equals 1, -1, -3/2, and 2. And that's the answer. What happened? Stop using it. Go get another one. Nobody here. Oh. All right. How do we feel by calculator? Doable? What? Cool? All right. For example 3, pick your poison.
Oh, no.
You can either do it algebraically or you can do it by calculator. So you have A equals 5, 2, 7, 3. And it wants to know, does matrix A have an inverse? If yes, find the inverse of the matrix. Is that 0? As long as it's not 0, the answer to the first part is, if you're determining whether it does. I mean, in theory, no. But it doesn't hurt you to practice. Press the tab button instead of trying to move the cursor then. So this one, when you check for this determinant, you would have gotten 15 minus 14, right? Which is 1. So that lets me know that, yes, there is an inverse, right? So because this is a 1, if I have 1 over 1, and all I'm doing is switching along the first diagonal, so that gives me 3, 5, changing signs along the other diagonal, -7, -2, anything times 1 is itself. So this one actually was pretty fast by hand. But. All right, how do we feel about finding the inverse?
So hard.
So hard, the horror, but doable. All right, cool. All right, that ends today. If you wanted to practice on your assignment for tomorrow, it's the first 2 problems. But